Breaking news this Sunday night, Joe Biden drops out. The American president announces he will not run for re-election.
Today, he's made a very difficult decision in the best interest of our nation.
The colossal consequences for the Democratic Party and the race for the White House. Suffocating smoke.
It's scary because our home base is around the corner.
High heat fueling western wildfires, spreading poor air quality across much of the country. Plus, the Lucky Seven.
You guys are real heroes.
A crew of fishermen from Newfoundland and Labrador, feared lost at sea, celebrate an emotional homecoming.
Global National. Reporting tonight, Jeff Semple.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. We begin tonight with the political bombshell announcement that has upended the U.S. presidential race. Joe Biden has dropped out and will not seek re-election in November. In this written statement, Biden said, "I believe it is in the best interest of my party and the country for me to stand down and to focus solely on fulfilling my duties as president for the remainder of my term." Biden is now fully endorsing his Vice-President Kamala Harris to replace him on the Democratic ticket. For weeks, Biden had resisted pressure from within his own party to step aside. The decision carries major implications for the U.S. and the world. We have extensive coverage tonight, starting with Jackson Proskow in Washington. So, Jackson, what do you make of the timing here? Why did Biden finally decide to drop out?
Well, Jeff, his position had simply become untenable, with more and more Democrats calling on him to drop out almost daily, including some of the highest-ranking members in the party and big-name donors as well. The polls were also increasingly bleak for Biden. In the critical swing state of Michigan, a poll out just today had Donald Trump widening his lead to 7 percentage points. It felt like there was no way to turn this around. There was also a sense that the longer Biden stuck it out, the more damaging the calls for him to drop out would become. And effectively, the argument became that he would tarnish his reputation if he weakened the party and let Trump win. And that may have been the final straw here. Now, Biden says he's going to speak to the nation later on this week, but Jeff, he's still recovering from COVID-19. And so we have to wait to get more insight on the president's thinking.
All right, so we'll wait for that. And as mentioned, Biden is endorsing Vice President Kamala Harris. But how likely is she to secure that Democratic presidential nomination?
Well, she already has Biden's endorsement tonight, along with the endorsement of Bill and Hillary Clinton and numerous senators and high-ranking Democrats. The endorsements keep rolling in here. Biden's endorsement is the critical one here, but his delegates, the ones that he won through the primary process, they're free to back whomever they choose. The Democratic Party says it will release details in the coming days about an orderly process to select a new nominee. We are less than 1 month away from the Democratic Convention in Chicago, where all of this has to be decided and formalized. There is, though, potential for an early virtual vote at the beginning of August if there's a sense that the party is ready to coalesce around Harris or one other candidate. Otherwise, we are headed to the first open convention since 1968. Jeff, in a statement, Vice President Harris says, "My intention is to earn and win the nomination." And tonight, Biden's campaign has formally changed its name to Harris's campaign on legal paperwork.
All right. And of course, Donald Trump officially became the Republican nominee just last week. So what does Biden's exit mean for the election race against Trump?
It kind of flips the script here. Suddenly, Donald Trump is the oldest presidential nominee in American history, and the questions about age and mental fitness now fall to him. You also have to remember that Trump's entire campaign has been focused on running against Joe Biden, and you could see in recent weeks those closest to Trump were trying to suggest that Biden should stay in the race, even suggesting they would file legal challenges to keep him on the ballot if he dropped out. That's because they really thought he was damaged and wanted to run against him. Two things are now likely to happen. One is that Trump is going to suggest that Harris is the same as Biden and is perhaps complicit in some sort of cover-up of Biden's health conditions. The second thing is that some Republicans, like the Speaker, are saying that if Biden is not fit to run again, then he's also not fit to serve out the remainder of his presidency and should resign immediately.
Never a dull moment for our Jackson Proskow in Washington. Thanks, Jackson. And Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is away on holiday, but also shared his thoughts on Biden's decision. On social media, Trudeau called Biden a great man, and everything he does is guided by his love for his country. As president, he is a partner to Canadians and a true friend. The United States, of course, is the world's most powerful country, and Joe Biden's announcement carries consequences far beyond America's borders. Reaction is pouring in from here in Canada and right around the world. Redmond Shannon joins us from our London bureau with more on the global fallout from the president's decision. So, Redmond, what are you hearing?
Jeff, perhaps no country monitors US elections as closely as Canada does, but what happens in Washington makes waves right across the globe. Here in the UK, new Prime Minister Keir Starmer said he respects Biden's decision, which Starmer says Biden made based on what he believes is best for the American people. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz thanked Biden for his work and said that the president's decision deserves recognition. That decision comes as the US is heavily involved in two huge conflicts. This is the news breaking on Russian TV. The US is by far the biggest supporter of Ukraine as it fights against Russia's invasion. A Kremlin spokesperson would only say that the US election is 4 months away and a lot can change. And of course, Washington continues to support Israel in its war in Gaza. Although the personal relationship between Biden and Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu has been strained since Israel's invasion of Gaza has progressed. Netanyahu is scheduled to fly to Washington tomorrow for a meeting with Biden on Tuesday. Americans who live abroad, including those in Canada, have been waiting for this decision. A short time ago, I spoke with the chair of Democrats Abroad in Toronto, Lee Strickland.
There was always that thing in the back of people's mind, is Joe capable of running this country for another 4 years? And everybody had their doubts. Finally, Joe came to the conclusion that no, he's ready to pass the torch. And as I said, we have some excellent candidates out there.
Closer to Biden, former White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki broke the news on MSNBC in her current job as news anchor. Even she was taken aback by the timing.
There was very little indication from people close to him and many people in the campaign that this was what was about to happen, as much as there were reports of Democrats calling on him to do that.
Perhaps the most glowing tribute to Biden today was from Barack Obama, the man under whom Biden served as vice president. Obama praised what he called Biden's trust and honesty, kindness and hard work. In his statement, the former president said everything that the Democratic Party stands for will be at risk if Donald Trump is allowed back in the White House. Jeff?
All right, Redmond Shannon in London tonight. Thanks, Redmond. And Joe Biden is staying on as president until his successor is sworn in. His decision also signals an abrupt end to a remarkable political career that has spanned half a century. Eric Sorensen looks at Biden's legacy and its potential impact at the polls.
The office of President of the United States.
He was the oldest U.S. president at his inauguration almost 4 years ago, and he was determined to top that this year.
USA! USA!
In the aftermath of the attack on the U.S. Capitol, he was ready for the job of president.
The scenes of chaos at the Capitol do not reflect a true America.
By many measures, Biden's presidency was a success, kickstarting the American economy after the pandemic.
The American Rescue Plan, now signed into law, we've delivered on that promise.
He also led NATO to help defend Ukraine against Russia's invasion. Before long, Biden was focused on re-election, warning of the return of Donald Trump.
Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic.
But by this year, he was looking increasingly frail, performing poorly in that infamous debate.
And I know how to do this job.
He tried desperately to hold on to the nomination, but standing down takes nothing away from the remarkable political career. 36 years in the Senate, 8 years as vice president, 4 years as president.
President Biden is doing a remarkably good job as president. If you look objectively at economic data, especially compared to the rest of the world, important legislation, he's well liked, he's well respected.
Will Biden's departure make a difference? 2 other unpopular Democratic presidents also stepped down from seeking re-election. Harry Truman was replaced by Adlai Stevenson, Lyndon Johnson by Hubert Humphrey. It didn't help. Republicans rolled to victories with Dwight Eisenhower and Richard Nixon. But in 2024, there's Donald Trump. The Democratic nominee will start with a solid percentage of Americans who do not want Trump.
To step aside in terms of the nomination of my party for president in order to make certain that Donald Trump is not returned to the White House, I admire, I respect, I love Joe Biden.
And that will be Joe Biden's new job, to govern and demonstrate that Democrats deserve re-election, even if he's not the one Americans will be voting for. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
Turning to other news now, fire crews in Western Canada are preparing for a dangerous few days. A heat wave with record high temperatures is stretching into a fourth week across much of BC and Alberta. High heat mixed with thick smoke are creating serious health concerns. Vancouver, Calgary, and Edmonton are all expected to see poor air quality this week. As Heather Yerkes-West explains, forecasters warn the worst could be yet to come.
Fire weather in Western Canada, and conditions are perfect for blazes like this one near Ashcroft, BC, to grow.
We did see some hot, dry conditions in the afternoon and increased fire behavior. And that's the fire that's just under 15,000 hectares.
The Shetland Creek fire is just one of more than 450 burning across BC and Alberta, with half considered out of control. Local crews now being aided by aircraft from Ontario and Alaska, and personnel from Australia and New Zealand, as residents watch forests burn dangerously close to home.
It's scary because our home base is around the corner. So, I don't know, they're doing a great job.
In Edmonton, festivals were left dealing with not only a heat advisory, but an air quality warning as well, with scorching temperatures and smoke.
We've got lots of water, we've got lots of ice on standby, and we just want to make sure that Edmontonians are feeling safe and secure when they're coming on site.
The city has been distributing N95 masks to those most vulnerable to the hazy conditions, with the air quality expected to remain at 10 plus or very high risk into early this week. And the heat is sticking around as well.
I begin to see some cooler temperatures arriving in northern Alberta, say by Tuesday, Wednesday of this week, but certainly in parts of southern Alberta, Calgary, for example, you probably have to go till Thursday, Friday, Saturday before you see a break.
But that break is expected to be short-lived. August typically sees some of the hottest days of the year, which means a lot more fire weather ahead. Heather Yerkes-West, Global News, Calgary.
In Newfoundland and Labrador, the town of New West Valley is celebrating the return of 7 fishermen who went missing in the Atlantic last week, and the province's premier was there to personally welcome them home.
You guys are real heroes for the people across Newfoundland and Labrador, and even hearing some of the stories about the humor and working together to keep everyone warm and to keep everyone safe and in good spirits is really what Newfoundland and Labrador is all about.
The cruise fishing boat was reported missing on Wednesday, but after a desperate search, the so-called Lucky 7 were found safe on a life raft on Friday night. The Coast Guard says the men used their last flare to alert rescuers to their location.
When we seen the helicopter, that was our big adrenaline rush. But you know what? We pulled off a miracle, and we are so lucky that every one of us is alive.
Capping off the emotional homecoming, a parade was held in the town this evening in honor of the fishermen and the rescue crews who found them. Escalating tensions in the Middle East. Coming up, the tit-for-tat strikes between Israel and Houthi rebels in Yemen. To the Middle East now, Israel says it shot down a missile fired from Yemen before it entered Israeli territory. The missile was launched by the Iran-backed Houthi rebel group. It comes a day after the Israeli military fired its own missile, striking inside Yemen for the first time. The Houthis have launched missiles and drones at Israel for months now, including a drone strike on Tel Aviv Friday that killed 1 person and injured 10 others. Russia says it intercepted 2 U.S. bombers that were approaching its border in the Arctic. Russia's defense ministry says it scrambled warplanes to confront the American jets over the Barents Sea, which then turned back. Moscow has previously accused the U.S. of making reconnaissance flights in the region to assist Ukraine and warned it could lead to a direct confrontation. The Pentagon has yet to comment on the Kremlin's claims. Bangladesh's Supreme Court has mostly scrapped a controversial law around job quotas that caused violent protests over the past month. Prior to the ruling, a third of public sector jobs were reserved for families of veterans from the country's War of Independence. That quota was initially abolished in 2018, but the country's High Court reinstated it last month, leading to deadly protests and curfews. The Supreme Court now says 93% of government jobs must be open to candidates based on merit. Despite the decision, some protest organizers say the demonstrations will continue. The future of fisheries still ahead. The impact of climate change on Canadian waterways. Canadian environmental and animal rights activist Paul Watson has been arrested in Greenland, likely over his anti-whaling activities. A statement by Watson's foundation says police apprehended him after boarding his ship, which had stopped in Greenland to refuel. His crew were about to travel through the Arctic to intercept a Japanese whaling ship in the Pacific. The arrest is believed to be linked to a 12-year-old Interpol red notice against Watson, issued at Japan's request. The country accuses Watson of endangering its whalers' lives following his previous efforts to interfere in their operations. The effects of climate change are already taking a toll on marine ecosystems around the world, and a new United Nations report says humans are farming more seafood than they catch from the wild. The study also flags how global warming could impact fish stocks in the coming decades. Heidi Petracek explains what it means for fishing in Canada.
Fishing is a way of life around the world and crucial to many economies. But a new report from the United Nations predicts an insecure future for fisheries under a worst-case climate scenario.
This is a seminal report. There has never been a report of this nature.
Global researchers collaborated to predict what climate change could do to fish stocks by the year 2100 under two models. One, if emissions go unchecked. The other, if net zero targets are reached by 2050. Under the high emissions scenario, global fish stocks could drop by at least 30% by the end of the century, compared to a low emissions scenario, which predicts a drop of 10% or less.
And there are some countries where the impact is much larger than the average. It is actually, in some cases, up to 50% under high emissions for particular countries. So it is very significant.
Under the high emissions model, Canada could see an almost 17% decline by century's end. The U.S. could reach 19%, although projections are worse for Alaska at 33.5%.
Also, more importantly for fisheries, we'll see changes in the types of species that are within a region.
Marine biologist Tyler Eddy worked on the report and says because fish go where temperatures suit them most, harvesters here could see changes in what and how much they catch. Waters off the coast of Nova Scotia and the Grand Banks off the coast of Newfoundland and Labrador warming more than the global average.
So if we use Newfoundland, for an example, snow crab is kind of a colder affiliated species. So we're expecting to see the biomass of snow crab to decrease in the future, whereas lobster typically likes warmer waters. So in the future, we might expect that the abundance of lobster would increase moving forward.
Because some countries rely on fish not only for the economy, but for food, protecting them against climate change also means fighting food insecurity. Another reason the report says the world's carbon emissions course must be reversed. Heidi Petracek, Global News, Halifax.
A race to the finish. Up next, drivers from around the world hit the road in Toronto for the Honda Indy. Today's leg of the Olympic torch relay was carried down the River Marne in Paris by the world's largest rowing boat. It's 40 meters long and can carry up to 24 people. The relay will end with the lighting of the Olympic cauldron during Friday's opening ceremony. It was unusually loud in Toronto today as race car drivers whipped through the city's downtown for this year's Ontario Honda Indy. American Colton Herta celebrated his first IndyCar Series win in over 2 years, and fans of all ages were treated to the sights and sounds of the racetrack. Our Kayla McLean was there.
The thrilling roar of the engine.
The adrenaline, the speed, I think.
The intoxicating rush of wind and colorful blur of steel.
The general mood here, you can feel it. It's great. It's a great vibe.
Welcome to the Speed Demons Playground, the Ontario Honda Dealers Indy roaring into Toronto's exhibition place for its 38th year, transforming Lakeshore Boulevard into an 11-turn concrete circuit for open-wheel racing.
The cars, the excitement,
It's a spectacle. Like, what would Toronto be without the Toronto Indy?
With cars whipping around this 2.84 kilometer long track at speeds upwards of 200 kilometers per hour, this is what dreams are made of for thousands of adrenaline junkies packed into these stands.
It's the rush of the cars, the sound of the cars, it's the vibe in the stands, it's everything.
Seeing the drivers, just being so close to them and actually seeing them race, it's just, everything's awesome.
Racing enthusiasts, young and old, rooting for their favorites.
Who's your favorite driver?
Pato.
We're looking forward to Grosjean. We want to see head-to-head racing at the highest level, bringing this to Canada. It's wonderful.
The twists and turns around the unforgiving concrete getting the best of some drivers. But at the end of the day, it's all part of the thrill.
We've been coming since 1986, never missed a year, and this is IndyCar racing.
Kayla McLean, Global News, Toronto.
And that is Global National for this Sunday night. I'm Jeff Semple. Tonight's Your Canada is this pair of cedar waxwings in Cap Lumiere, New Brunswick. We love seeing your Canada, so please keep emailing your photos to viewers@globalnational.com. Thanks for watching. Donna will be back with you again tomorrow. Have a great night.